This is Professor Chakraborty, and today's lecture is on spinal cord and spinal tracts. A little bit fundamentals that we have learned before proceeding. So this is the neuron anatomy. As you can see, this is the cell body. These are the dendrites, and this is the axon. So we are actually going to concentrate on the axonal part of the neuron. And as you can see, this neuron is myelinated. That is, means that it has myelin sheet covering the axons. When a neuron is covered by a myelin sheet, it's called myelinated. When it is not covered by a myelin sheet, it's known as unmyelinated neurons. Myelinated neurons, because of the presence of myelin sheet, appears to be white in color. These are lipid layers and give it a white coloration. Unmyelinated neurons, which do not have the myelin sheet, and so we can see the cell body very clearly, give it a gray or a brown, coloration. It looks more brownish, the region where they are concentrated. So the places in the CNS where there is myelinated neurons, it gives it a white appearance, and we call it white matter. And places or the regions where there is more of unmyelinated neurons, we call it as a gray matter. So this is showing you the cross section of brain and spinal cord and the distribution of gray and white matter in both these structures. The function of myelinated and unmyelinated neurons is very pretty similar, and we'll go into each part, brain and spinal cord, how they work. But structurally, the distribution is very different between brain and spinal cord. So if you look at the brain, for example, you can see the green matter is on the outer part of the brain, which is the cortex. Okay, and the inner part of the brain is covered by white matter. In case of spinal cord, the inner part, which shows an H-shaped structure or butterfly-like structure, is the gray matter, and the outer part of it is the white matter. In both brain and spinal cord, the white matter is mainly because of myelinated neurons, and the gray matter are unmyelinated neurons. So color, definitely, when there is less myelin, it gives a darker appearance. When there is more myelin, it gives it a whitish appearance. In case of brain, the function, the main for the gray matter, it is mainly for processing and integration. And for the white matter, it is for signal conduction between the brain region. In case of gray matter in spinal cord, it is for reflex integration, which is this part in here. And for white matter is signal conduction from and to the brain. So this is the part which we are talking about, and we will be learning at length during this entire lecture how this white matter in the spinal cord helps in signal conduction to and from the brain. So again, the distribution of gray and white matter in case of brain and spinal cord, both being part of the CNS, is a little different. In brain, the gray matter is on the outer part and the white matter is in the inner part. In case of spinal cord, the gray matter is in the inner part, the white matter is on the outer part. Functionally, the white matter in case of brain is for signal conduction, and in case of spinal cord, it is conduction, also signal conduction, but to and from the brain. So spinal cord's main function is to communicate with the brain through the white matter, which is the main focus of our discussion in this lecture. So we are trying to understand in this the positioning of the spinal cord. And if you look, this is a cross section of the spinal cord, and this is the posterior view, and this is the anterior view. The anterior part is also known as the ventral part, and the posterior part is known as the dorsal part. So this is the white region, this is the gray part. And in the center, this is the central canal through which passes the CSF. We have learned that before. And in addition to that, if you look into the spinal cord, we have learned this, that the spinal cord really tapers from top to bottom. Okay, and the spinal cord is divided into sections, which is known as cervical, thoracic, lumbar, and sacral. And through each of these division comes out the spinal nerves. The spinal nerves is part of peripheral nervous system. So if you take a cross section of each of these region, as shown in here, cervical is this, thoracic is this, lumbar shows this, and sacral shows this. So each of these sections, if you look at, structurally they look a little different. What is different in here? So if you look at from the dorsal end to the ventral end, so we are talking from cervical region to the sacral region, the white matter actually is largest in here. The distribution of white matter is largest here, and it gradually decreases as we go into the sacral region. On the other hand, the gray matter is least in the cervical region, and it increases as we go further and further into the sacral region. And there is an importance for this. Let's understand that. So if we are considering from the sacral region, think about the axons that are coming into the sacral region. The axons or the neurons that are coming in go into the medial region from the sacral end, go to the lumbar, pass it to the thoracic, and then go to the cervical region, which then goes into the brain. Then in the lumbar regions, neurons or axons come into the lumbar region, near the medial region, then go into the thoracic, and then cervical, and leads to the brain. From the thoracic goes into the thoracic region, then goes into the cervical region, and then goes to the brain. And cervical goes into this spinal cord region in here, and then goes to the brain. So when I'm saying this, I hope you understand. If there is one neuron that is coming here, in this region, there is two neurons, which is one from the sacral, one from the lumbar, and then the third joins it from the thoracic, and the fourth joins it from the cervical. So more and more neuron or axons are joining in here as we go from the sacral region to the cervical region. So the thickness at the top, which is the cervical region, is much higher than that in the sacral region. So the white matter actually increases as we go from sacral to dorsal region. Since the white matter occupies more region or more space in the cervical region than the sacral region, the gray matter actually at that point has less surface area to cover, and more is available in the sacral region. And apart from that, remember, the muscles in the lower proximities are much bigger than that on the cervical region. So the distribution or the way the white and the gray matter is, distributed in the different regions of the cervical, in the spinal cord, is different as well. This takes us to the general structure of the white matter. So this is a cross section, and we have learned that gray matter occupies the central region in the spinal cord, and this gray region, corresponding to the gray region's nomenclature, the white columns or the white matter is named. So this is the anterior part of the spinal cord. This is the posterior part of it. The anterior part has a fissure, which is known as anterior median fissure, which is a deep groove. And in the posterior end, there is a sulcus, a shallow groove which is known as posterior median sulcus. This region here is the anterior part and is known as anterior white column. And there is a region right in here in the center above the anterior median fissure, which is known as the anterior white commissure. What does it mean? Anterior white commissure is a region where the axons of the white column cross each other. Okay, this is the region where the axons cross each other. So it's known as anterior white commissure. So anterior white column, and this is a posterior end, which is known as posterior white column, and in between this side region, which is known as the lateral white column. Okay, one very important thing to remember in here, these columns have another name which is known as funiculus. So we call them anterior funiculus, posterior funiculus, and lateral funiculus. So these regions are also named as funiculus. Okay, reviewing it again. So these white columns are divided into three major regions. One is the anterior funiculus, posterior funiculus, and lateral funiculus. In addition, there is a anterior white commissure where axons cross each other from one region to the other, from the left or right region. So we are talking about tracts here. So what are tracts? Tracts are a group of axons or nerve fibers, you can say, which have the same origin and destination. When a group of neurons, think about a neuron and its axons, and when they flock together or join together to form a bundle of fibers, and they start from one region and reach to the same destination point, then it's known as tracts. So we learn at length the tracts shown in here in red are the descending tract, and shown in blue are the ascending tracts. So what are the different kinds of neurons that are present in the spinal cord or in the CNS in general? There are three types of neurons. One is known as sensory or afferent neurons, motor or efferent neurons, association or interneurons. Any neurons that carry sensory information, that is taking in information from the receptors of your skin, maybe from different visceral organs, maybe any sensory neuron which senses the information and takes it from one end to the brain is known as sensory or afferent neurons. Okay, so it takes any neurons that carry sensory information towards the CNS. So when it says CNS, it can be spinal cord or it can be brain. And motor neurons actually carry information from the CNS to the different parts of your body. Okay, so for example, if you remember when we did the spinal cord, the gray matter took up somatic sensory neurons, came in here, and through the ventral root, the motor neurons left out the spinal cord. Same in here. In case of white matter also, it says sensory information come from the different parts of your body. It can come in through the white matter, and then what it does is from the white matter of the spinal cord it passes to the brain. Okay, it can be brain in different parts. It can be brain in the brainstem, it can be brain in the cerebrum, or it can be from the cerebellum also. Okay, so these are motor neurons that carry information from the CNS, which has been processed and then goes into the different parts of your body. Motor neurons or efferent neurons. Motor neurons or efferent neurons carry information from the brain. It can be from the cerebrum, It can be from the brainstem, it can be from the cerebellum, and can take information to the spinal cord, which is then distributed to the whole body. So those are motor neurons. Sensory information carry information from the different parts of your body to the CNS. And association neuron or interneurons are neurons that are help in connecting neurons within the CNS. That is, maybe it is within the spinal cord or within the brain cells. So the afferent or sensory neurons, they are of different types. We will do it very briefly, and they can be classified as A alpha, A beta, A delta, and C neurons. It is also called I1, IA, IB, and ID and C fibers. Okay. So, what I need you to understand here is the diameter of these neurons actually determine the speed at which they will transfer the information. So, if you see the diameter is largest for A alpha or 1 alpha or 1A, which is about 13 to 20 micrometer, the speed is much higher, which is 80 to 120 meters per second they travel, and as it goes the diameter decreases, the speed of conduction decreases drastically. But another important part to remember, the distribution of these axons or primary afferent axons are dependent on their function. So depending if it's a pain and temperature involving sensory information, usually it is A delta, or third or axons from the muscles, which is number 3, carry information from them to the CNS. Motor neurons. Motor neurons are neurons that carry information from the brain to the different parts of your body, or from the spinal cord to the different parts of our body. So you can see in here, motor neurons are of 2 types, which is known as upper motor neurons, UMN, or lower motor neurons, LMN. Motor neurons carry information from the cerebrum or brainstem, and then they pass it sometimes to the spinal cord. These are upper motor neurons. And when it goes to the spinal cord or goes directly into the skeletal muscles, they are known as the lower motor neuron. Again, you can see it in here. These are the upper motor neurons, and they send information to the lower motor neurons, can be the spinal cord, and then it can pass into the lower motor neurons, which continues into the spinal cord. So the information that comes either directly from the CNS is the upper motor neuron, and when it goes to the effector, which is a skeletal muscle, which is known as the lower motor neuron. So in upper motor neuron, the cell bodies in the motor cortex or brainstem, they actually control the lower motor neurons, directly involved in it. And the lower motor neuron, the cell bodies are in the anterior horn of the spinal cord, and they actually innervate the muscles. And the lower motor neurons are of 3 different types. One is known as alpha motor neurons, gamma motor neurons, and beta motor neurons. So again, motor neurons can be classified into 2 parts or 2 types. One is known as upper motor neurons, which is mainly from the cortex or cerebrum and brainstem, and lower motor neurons are usually from the spinal cord. They come out and they innervate the skeletal muscle. So we need to study 2 terms that we will be using in this chapter a lot. One is called the ipsilateral, and the other is known as the contralateral innervation. We have already learned about decussation. So several of these tracts undergo decussation, means as they pass up or down the brainstem, whether it's ascending or descending, from brainstem and spinal cord, meaning that they cross over from left side of the body to the right side of the body or vice versa. As a result, the left side of the brain receives sensory information from the right side of the body and sends motor commands to that side. So it's going from one side and receiving information into that side itself. So the left side of, for example, the left side of the brain receives sensory information from the right side of the body and sends motor commands to that side, while the right side of the brain serves, senses, and controls the left side of the body. Therefore, this is an example in which a stroke, if you have, stroke patients, that damages motor centers on the right side of the brain, cause the paralysis is usually on the left limbs and vice versa. Okay, so that's decussation. In here, when the origin and destination of the tract are on the opposite side of the body, we say it's contralateral, which is this, which means the neuron or tract control and receive information from the opposite side of the body. When the tract does not decussate, its origin and destination are on the same side of the body, we say it's ipsilateral. So if it's in the same side, it originates from the right side, and the destination point is on the right side, then we say it is ipsilateral. And if it's on the opposite side, we say it is contralateral.